all have been hearing about it. This Omicron, variant from the coronavirus, the most highly contagious thus far, although the least potent. It's, in fact, if other variants, including the Delta variant, was being compared to flu-like symptoms, or maybe, in fairness, maybe a severe flu with a couple of add-ons that typically aren't included in the flu, well, then this Omicron is being compared to, I hate to say it, but the common cold. Granted, maybe a bad cold, but a cold nonetheless. And it just seems that every generation of COVID, since its origins a couple of years ago, has been less and less and less potent, which is good. We're heading on a good trajectory because it's better than going the other direction. Well, but again, the Omicron is a lot more contagious. And as it surges on, consumers and workers, they're kind of worn out, but still resilient. On top of the loss and grief the coronavirus has already caused, well, we're now confronting a record surge of new infections, well over 250,000 cases a day on average over the past, I think it's basically been a week, over the past 7 days. This is according to data from Johns Hopkins University. Now, that eclipses the previous record. It was actually set last January, 1 year ago. Now, the curve points steeply upwards, which means that we're about to enter our third year of the coronavirus. And despite all the horrible headlines about COVID, the holiday shopping season was actually pretty successful. Our first guest this morning into the Daily Connerton Memorial Company interview chair has been studying consumer psychology throughout the entire duration of the coronavirus. She released her latest research on how shoppers are feeling. She's a consultant with decades of experience, and what she studies is consumers and consumer behavior. She's worked with dozens of well-known and trusted global brands, including Walmart, Applebee's, IHOP, Kimberly Clark, Frito Lay, La Quinta, and, oh, thank heaven for 7-Eleven. Let's welcome to the show, making her debut, consumer consultant Lisa Miller. Lisa, good morning.
Good morning, Gary.
It is great to have you this morning.
Well, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about what you specifically do, and then I've got some questions for you as far as consumer confidence is concerned right now.
Sure, and as your setup said, I have been studying the consumer for a very long time, decades in fact. But what I decided to do, though, in the beginning of the pandemic, I just thought we needed some different questions. So I started a project, and I called it The Journey Back to Joy. And the reason I called it that was to get to the other side of it, all of us needed to kind of get beyond the fear and get back to living our lives in joy. So that was the whole premise of it, and I literally been collecting it since March of last year. 43 ways of research, 43,000 people over the last year and a half.
Oh my goodness! Are we creatures of habit?
Well, we are. It is, but then when things get taken away, like we can't go to restaurants or movies and things get shut down, obviously, consumers have to pivot. But this holiday season was great because all of that pent-up demand, people thought I was crazy when my data was showing that people were going to come back in droves to the stores, and that's exactly what happened.
All right, so they're not buying online as much anymore. I mean, people they don't have Amazon fever, right? They're not afraid to get out of their house and actually head into, dare I say, a brick and mortar store and actually conduct business that way. So is that what I'm understanding?
Well, it's actually interesting. So the holiday sales were up about 8.5%, which was the largest increase in 17 years.
Wow, that's
so that
great.
in of its, I know, it was excellent. And the thing is actually a little bit of a win-win for everybody because even department stores, they were up 20%. I mean, literally 20%. But online was still up 11%.
Oh,
so it wasn't that people necessarily stopped, shopping online. It was just that there was they literally call it joy in the air. This holiday season, everybody was pent up. Omicron was still there, even in December, but people were like, hey, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to get back out. And shopping, retail therapy, is a fun social activity. So it was exciting for the economy.
I agree with you, Lisa. I mean, it can be a fun activity. You go out, you can, you go shopping and maybe even buy something for yourself. Go, oh my goodness, maybe I'll buy myself a Christmas gift because I really like it. I never even knew this existed. You go out for lunch, you could take family, you could take friends, and it could be a whole afternoon. I completely agree. So I guess from what I'm getting from you on this is that shoppers are starting to ignore the negative news that's been coming out on television and in newspapers.
Right. Well, we've been tracking it, as I said, since March of last year, so we have a lot of data. But what's interesting is in our December report, which was right before the holidays, like December 21st, 45% of Americans said they were burned out and tuning out kind of COVID and just wanting to kind of start back living their lives. And that was up 5 points since October. And then on the other side, we had about 32% saying that they were pulling back their behavior. So we're not out of the woods. And yes, there's still concern right now for Omicron, but the long term is we are step by step, moving in the right direction for sure. Good. All right. So now, are you hearing more about vaccination passports, whether digital or in paper form or card form? And if so, how is that impacting in-person brick-and-mortar consumer shopping? Well, I did ask a question about that, and it's interesting, even among vaccinated people, there's, 42% of Americans, just as recently as this last weekend, said they don't think that people shouldn't have to show proof of vaccination. And so it's a very polarizing topic, but there's definitely a pretty large group of people that just say we shouldn't have to do that. So it's interesting. Well, yes, because if you look at it from a consumer's perspective, and there's, to your point, there's two schools of thought. There's those who are uber conscious of how things, about contracting any variant of the coronavirus, and they will not patronize a store or a restaurant unless they feel that their safety is first and foremost and is protected. I've spoken to people who's like, no, I won't even go into that restaurant. Well, why won't you go into that restaurant? Well, because you don't need to be vaccinated. In fact, they're not even really. They're not even enforcing the mask mandate. Okay, well, but I'll go to that one over there. I'll go to that restaurant because they do. You have to be vaccinated to go in there. So I will go into that restaurant any day. Well, that's that person. You talk to somebody else. You talk to somebody else, and they'll say, "Well, no, I'm not. I'm not going to go to that place because they're segregating me." They're making me feel like my money's not good. I'm not worthy. And just because I'm not getting a vaccination for personal reasons, they're not going to allow me in their restaurant. So if you take that scenario where these restaurateurs, and I'm talking mom and pops, I'm not talking about the chains that have corporate support in a corporate headquarters, and as well as boutique owners or independent retailers, they're not doing themselves any service by segregating who's allowed in their outlet or in their facility or in their store, and who can't come. Yeah, and I think what it is that, just like you said, from a consumer view, I think those independent operators are going to have their point of view. And it's a polarizing situation. And depending on what part of the country you are living in, the numbers vary a lot. So if in the Northeast, there are going to be a little bit more likelihood to be accepting of those types of things, where in the South or the Midwest, less so. So it is going to be, we're not out of the woods. And I think these types of polarizing issues are, the Supreme Court just yesterday, in fact, with the vaccine mandate. Yeah, I saw that. Said, yeah. So, we're not out of woods on all of those types of topics. But I think at the end of the day, if an restaurant operator is going to have those types of policies, then they just have to enforce them because you mentioned, if you have a mask policy and then you don't enforce it, it kind of really, it's a double dip down is to say, wait, you're having that, but then you're not enforcing it. So my advice to those operators out there, if you're going to do that, which is their own choice, then just make sure you enforce it because that's what consumers will want to see.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these independent retailers are damned if they do and damned if they don't. Because I know, and I'm sure, Lisa, I'm sure you've got to know somebody personally, as I do, where somebody will say, "Oh yes, I will definitely go into that store because you've got to be vaccinated, you've got to wear your mask, and so on and so forth." And I know somebody else who says just the opposite. Yeah, I'm never going to that store again, and I used to love it. Well, why? Because you've got one thing to have the mask mandate, but I've got to be vaccinated, and I'm not going to be vaccinated just to walk into that store. So they've lost me. So essentially, what these entrepreneurs are doing is, and we're seeing the results of it, or hearing about the results of it, is not just segregating their clientele or their patrons. They're losing 50% of their business because they say 50% are support this, 50% don't. That's why I say they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't.
Yeah, and so what's fascinating about that, Gary, is I guess on the positive side is that the vast majority of people are sitting in the middle where they're like, nah, I don't really care, it's no impact. But the issue really becomes is who are those people that are on both sides? If it's a heavy user of a restaurant or a heavy shopper, and they're the ones that are on the side that I'm not coming, that's when it will really, really hurt. Versus if they are a once-a-year type of person, yeah, it'll hurt, but it won't be as bad. So it's a very, very complicated issue about not only how many people, but are those your heavy users or not. So it's, like I said, those types of topics are not going to be going away anytime soon. And what's fascinating, too, is that, among those that are unvaccinated, what my data shows is that it's not necessarily, yes, there's sort of personal choice is one of the top reasons people are saying it, but it's more that they feel like they're not getting the full story. So it's not just personal choice or long-term side effects. It's more like this notion of just trusting the experts. That's what I'm seeing in erosion. So I'm going to be, continuing to ask questions around that.
We are speaking with consumer consultant Lisa Miller. Lisa, let's look at the other side of things. People are upset because they're looking for specific items that they used to be able to purchase regularly at their favorite retailer. And that retailer can no longer get them or can get them in smaller quantities, which, as you know, through the law of economics and supply and demand, it's going to increase the price on top of the already inflationary pricing that we're seeing now. So people are getting frustrated by saying, well, I can't get this particular part, if they're going to an auto parts store, let's say, and they need it for their car, or I can't buy, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go through every type of product, but it's for every scenario nearly. And it's supply chain issues. How is that impacting the retailer?
Well, what was interesting for holidays specifically is because there was so much news about that, people did start their holiday shopping earlier. And so because of that, I think that's how there was a positive, amongst, even though with all of those shortages out there, the sales were still high because people started earlier. The other thing that's happening is, again, when it came to holiday, people went in with a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, because the expectation, it's kind of a sad state, right? Is the expectation is that things are going to be out of stock. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be able to pivot and find things. But without a doubt, those frustrations are still high. Pricing is high, inflation, and that's impacting frequency. So, yeah, I'd love to go out to eat, and I had a great time, at this restaurant, but it's not as affordable to go out as often anymore. So then they can't come, then that's when instead of coming twice a month, they might come once a month. So there's so many things that are still needing to unwind: supply chain, inflation, labor shortages. All of those things are still impacting the economy greatly.
Well, you talk about labor shortages. Let's go there. There's some restaurants, and I mean, restaurants that have been around for generations, they're staples in certain parts of the state, and people have been frequenting them for years. So it's not like there's some new upstart where, 50% of them can survive and 50% can't. These are restaurants that have long-standing reputations, and they're finding themselves closing. Well, it started with 1 day a week, and now we're seeing 2, sometimes 3, where I say, well, how can you even pay the mortgage or pay the rent or pay your utilities? How do you even survive? And they say, well, number one, I can't get all the supplies that I need. And I'm not just talking about food, Gary. I'm talking about even other supplies to stay in business, cleaning supplies and so on and so forth. And the other issue is staffing. I don't have enough staff to facilitate the need that we have to be open 7 days a week. So that's got to be a huge issue as well.
Right. And all of those things is absolutely, like, I literally last night was wanted to do online ordering from my favorite local restaurant, and they weren't taking online orders. And
really?
That had happened. But yes, they were not taking online orders. Then I called, and they were not taking phone orders. And so I had to go in and walk in to actually place my order. And so it made, like, I had to really want that burger,
Right.
But the restaurant itself was not, I mean, it was probably, maybe 2/3 full, but there were a lot of empty tables. And even when I ordered my takeout, it was, 20-minute wait for that burger. And it was because of the kitchen. And so I think that, again, consumers are kind of getting used to it. But, even when you want to order delivery or takeout, it's impacting that with shorter hours. Even just like saying, hey, we're throttling it back. And restaurants are having to make the choice. I'm going to take care of the people inside my restaurant first. And then they're prioritizing capacity for those other, delivery and takeout.
Did you eat in last night? When you had dinner, did you eat since you had to go there, since they weren't doing, to curbside or takeout or to-go orders, did you end up eating at the restaurant or did you take it home?
Well, it was fascinating when I walked in, and again, I love this restaurant, been there a million times, and I was like, okay, are they going to even put this to go? Because I really just wanted to go back home and eat at home.
Yeah.
But we did actually eat at home. So we were able to do the takeout, and it was delicious, because it was hot, because I waited for my order.
Well, good.
So. Yeah. So, but that's what's happening out there is people are having to make choices, and it makes you pause. You have that. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? And now prices are coming into that. Am I going to even be able to get what I want? I mean, there's just so many things that come into it that are just are not. Are things that we've had to get used to as a consumer.
So, Lisa, my final question for you, as I only have about a minute and a half remaining or so, is the workforce, as we all know, we see the statistics as well. Not as many people have returned to work after the initial stages of coronavirus. Now, granted, some businesses are completely out. They're gone. They went out of business. So they've got no job to return to. Others have just gone back, as we were just talking about, part-time. So, so I find it rather ironic in listening to your statistics that, we had an incredibly successful holiday season. Where are the consumers, since a lot of people have not rejoined the workforce? Where are they getting this money to purchase their Christmas gifts?
Well, if you think about this, because I do get asked that question often, if you think about 2020, and this is, again, a tale of two cities. So, unfortunately, there are still a large number of people that are absolutely struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, and that still is a situation. However, on the other side, if in 2020 people were not going out as much, right? So they're not going on trips, they're not going to restaurants, and all of that spending power got socked away. So there's a pretty good chunk of people that actually saved money during 20 and 21, and so now they're out there kind of splurging on it.
All right.
And so and unfortunately,
you've
probably seen the news. Yeah, you've probably just got the credit card debts actually going up too. So, but yeah.
All right, Lisa Miller, consumer consultant. Thanks for your time this morning. I look forward to having you back on. It was a great time.
Thank you so much, Gary. Have a good one.
You do the same.